Those of us in campus public safety have been working really hard, day and night, thinking about how we can improve campus safety on our campuses across this nation. Campus Roll Call is designed to provide a space for practitioners, academics, community members, and department members to engage in thoughtful conversations about issues that matter to us. My name is Ronnell Higgins. I am the Director of Public Safety and Chief of Police at Yale University. I want to welcome you to Campus Roll Call. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Campus Roll Call podcast, a place for candid conversations about race, equality, public safety, leadership, and community from our unique perspective here at Yale University. In this episode, we're going to talk about how Yale Public Safety is evolving its role with student affairs. This afternoon's guest is Vice President and Secretary Kim Goff-Crews of Yale University. Kim has an undergraduate degree from Yale University and a Juris Doctorate from Yale University as well. She was born and raised in Los Angeles, California.
Correct.
And came and left Los Angeles for the first time when she came to Yale University.
Yes.
Kim, we've worked together now for some years, but we've never talked about how you transitioned from Los Angeles to the East Coast.
Well, it was interesting. I came to Yale at a time when people didn't really visit schools before they were accepted and actually matriculated. So I came sight unseen.
Wow.
But I chose Yale because it was small. The college was, you had the residential college systems. And I also chose Yale, I have to be honest, because it was in a Black community. I was going off on my own for the first time. I felt like I wanted to be in an environment that was that seemed familiar, so that I could be on campus but have an off-campus community that I would recognize. Right. So that's one of the reasons why I chose Yale. But it was so interesting. I came on the Connecticut limousine, which was really functioning very well. You remember Connecticut limousine? Yep. I come up, 95, and I see Kimberly Avenue. Good sign. Drive around. Like I was like, "There's Goff Street." Good sign. So I was like, "Okay, this might be a really good place to be." But it was an interesting transition because I'd never been in snow. I'd never really been far away from home. So it was pretty intense first semester, I think.
Kim, what would you say is different today for students who are coming to Yale for the first time versus when you arrived at Yale?
Well, I think one of the things that was the same is that we all arrived with some degree of anxiety about coming to the school and trying to figure out where you fit in because, you just left. You had a sense of belonging and sort of where you stood in the society, but then in the society that you were in, but then you come and you have to kind of start all over again. So that's somewhat the same. What I love about the students is that they recognize that they are anxious and that they do need to sort of figure out how to deal with their mental health and well-being. And so you see a lot more requests for support in that area than when we were in school. We sort of just sucked it up and did what we need to do. So that's what's very different. They also have an expectation of being in a community that is diverse. And they're actively looking for that no matter who they are, and figuring out ways and being willing to figure out ways to interact with each other as well with new ideas. So I find that really very interesting about this particular generation of students.
Well, the population at Yale now, the student population at Yale is much more diverse now than it was then. It is. As well.
And you see that in student leadership. You see that you see that when you go to the dining hall, certainly the new dining hall Schwarzman. Yeah. So it is very diverse. But again, what I really appreciate is that they're expecting it. They're expecting to engage, however difficult that may be at times. So I really enjoy that about them.
So that leads me to my next question, having to do with how public safety is evolving its role, how we are evolving our role with student affairs. Yes. How would you describe the experience for students who are arriving now at Yale versus when they were arriving at Yale when you arrived at Yale?
So when I arrived at Yale, first of all, as we talked about, I'm from Los Angeles. And, Los Angeles has its own unique relationship between the community and the police. So for me personally, I wasn't having any expectation of having any positive interactions with the police. The police were the police. They did, they did lockouts. They did a number of other things. I didn't really have any interactions with the police when I was here, but I think we were all very concerned about and respectful of the police. It just had a respectful, distant relationship with them.
I've heard that before.
Yes, exactly. Now, also, we didn't talk about the fact that I also ran the Afro-American Cultural Center for a number of years. So after I had my 7-year stint as a student, I came back after practicing law and I ran the Cultural Center. And that feeling around police interaction was still here. It didn't mean people didn't like the police. They were just respectful and distant. Coming back, now what I see is there, and particularly under your leadership, I have to say, is a sense of much more interaction with the community. So I know that I work with student leaders. They know you. They know Anthony. They know a lot of police a lot differently because I think there was a whole shift while I was gone around the community-based policing. So I think people, now when people see the police, it's a little bit more often a more pleasant interaction because you're seen as part of the community and people feel that you're part of the community. So I think what's happened is you've shifted, I think, and you should tell me if this is right, you've shifted the way in which you approach your work. I think we as a community, for most part, have shifted our expectations of you, which is probably why we're at a moment where we're trying to get, to take the next iteration of that expectation. So I think that things are better. And there's higher expectations of our interactions with you, from students' perspective, I would say.
I just
does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. And I just want to touch a little bit about the Afro-American Cultural Center.
Yes.
Because I remember, you may not remember this, but I remember being assigned there as a police officer around a party,
right,
and I'll never forget. There was a party just before, or I think the night of the Yale Harvard game. And that party went to probably about 2 or 3 o'clock.
That was a great party, I have to say. That was a great party.
And
that was a legendary party.
There was all sorts of food left over, and you were like, officer, are you hungry? And you sent me home with a sweet potato pie. And I never forgot that.
That's true.
But really, that experience serving on a security detail at the Afro-Am House, I have to share with you, Kim, that there were times where that respectful distance, I felt it.
Right.
I felt it. They wanted you there, but at the same time, they didn't want you in their space, And so I found over time, having worked the Afro-Am House, that I had really good conversations with students and with the deans who oversaw the house as well over time. And I have to say that has shaped my thinking as a leader, coming up through the ranks and working various events at the Afro-Am House and conversing with various deans over the years about the students' concerns at the Afro-Am House. So,
well, can I say, from my perspective, one of the things I learned is the value of getting to know the people that you're working with, but also the people who are supporting your community. So, as I said, I started off in Los Angeles with a very interesting perspective about what the police were and how they worked. And over time, both as a student, but then as an administrator, getting to know people in a personal level and seeing them in events and working with them has really impacted the way in which I view the police. And I think as I talk to student leaders, that is also the case. So the interaction has been really powerful. I think very helpful. And you and I are now talking about evolving that with a new care center kind of focus on the way in which we support students. And I think that's just going to bode well for the future.
Sometimes when we're trying to figure out where we're going, we have to understand from whence we come.
Right.
And one thing I can recall walking into the Afro-Am House back in the day is to the right on the wall, there was this huge mural. And on the mural were pictures of former students. And there were some photographs of police officers in that mural with some of the students. So when I was trying to figure out what my place was on this campus and with students of color, I saw examples of how that could be done. So again, that shaped my thinking. But things have changed. And, we are in a place right now where policing must evolve. And we're working really hard on this campus to do just that. Can you talk about your role in shaping our fit for purpose response? We met with you directly and your team over the course of a summer. I mean, we had a lot of meetings. We had a lot of meetings
in the middle of COVID.
And I have to say, you are a tremendous advocate for students, and you made it really, really clear what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And I appreciate your candor on that. But you also, at the same time, understood that we had to work together to figure this out.
Right.
You want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, so first of all, thank you for that. And we did meet quite a few times during the summer. I had spoken to a lot of students, as you know, and you and I actually had spoken to student activists together as well about some of their concerns. And I think that part of what we both learned, but I understood because I had actually done this on another campus, the campus I was at before, was the sense that the partnership between student life personnel and the police and security actually is really, really important. And that most students don't mind seeing the police, but not by themselves if the police, armed police, are really what's not needed in a situation. Right. So the team approach becomes much more important. And I actually think it's already existed. I think it already did exist, Ronnell, for us. We just didn't name it, and we have not. We didn't have a protocol that was active for us to be able to be in a room together in a situation more consistently than we are now. And so I think that what we came to understand, and what I really advocated for, was that care-centered approach where you have a number of people, either from mental health, student life, security, police, who are able to respond in a moment's notice to an incident, and then figure out with the student what is needed to resolve that particular incident. And that's really what we're all trying to do. Something you always talk about, fit for purpose is the right phrase. But that's really the framework that we were all working on, the one that I laid out from our conversations, both of our conversations with students, and that we all agreed to.
Yeah, it was, I think you're right. We had an informal practices in place, but it wasn't formal. And I think what we were lacking was, an understanding between public safety and student life. Not that any people weren't working together.
Right.
It was just an understanding of roles and purpose. And I think one of the things that activism has done over this last few years has really caused us in public safety to do some serious introspection about what our role is on campus. And now when a person at Yale University, a student, a faculty member, or a staff member, contacts the Yale police, as opposed to us just immediately sending a police officer, the call is triaged.
Right.
The call is triaged. In other words, we're trying to determine what the best public safety resource is to help solve that problem or be responsive to that community member. It wasn't always that way.
Right.
It wasn't always that way. What I have found in our work is, as I talked about earlier, the Yale police officers many, many years ago when you were a student were unlocking
Not
doors.
that many years ago. Thank you very much. That's too many minis in there.
I'm
Sentence.
sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. A while ago,
Okay, that's teasing.
When you were a student, the Yale police were doing things like unlocking doors. Here's a fun fact. The Yale police, way before my time, used to turn the grills on in the dining hall so that when the cooks arrived in, the grills were already ready. Yeah, if you talk to some of the old-time police officers, that's how the police were used. But Yale is not unique. The police are here 24 hours a day. And therefore, on campuses like Yale and other campuses, the police were just kind of the default for a lot of the things that either no one else wanted to do or there wasn't anyone to do.
That's true.
But now we have become much, much more professional, and we've evolved.
But part of what we've talked about is you can't be the only people who are here 24/7. So part of what we want to evolve is a team of people who are available 24/7, so that it's not only the police or security who have to show up at something. So that eventually we'll get there. But I think that's what you and I have agreed to, that we need to.
Let's talk about that for a second,
Okay.
because one of the things about Yale is we're all very collegial. We all work well together. We all know who to contact. But it shouldn't be me calling Kim. It should be a system in place, a plan in place. Pilar Montalvo, Assistant Vice President, will now be working under you, and she will be a permanent partner for Yale Public Safety. We want to thank you for bringing back that role to the Secretary's office because we believe it was needed. And we also believe that with her working in your office, that we're going to get a lot done, and and it's going to create that team approach.
Well, first of all, thank you for that, because I think it's very exciting to have her. She just started this week. To have Pilar to do this role, and hopefully you'll have her on the podcast at some point. But you're right. We needed to have somebody who's a point person who was available to you at all times, and she will build out a system with you that will be the fit for purpose system that we're going to put in place. So I'm very excited about that. I think you're absolutely right. It was what's needed, and I'm glad that we were able to get that settled quickly.
Good. So I just want to pull out a couple of highlights from our fit for purpose response. So you heard me talk about how calls are now triaged.
Yes.
When someone contacts the Yale Police Department, the question is asked: is this a police, fire, or medical emergency? I want students to know, Kim, that the more information they can provide our dispatchers about their need, the better, we're in a better position to provide the appropriate resource.
Well, first of all, can I thank you for having dispatch switch to be able to ask those questions? Because one of the things we heard from students over and over again is, please don't give me 5 numbers to call. So I have to figure out what I need first before I can figure out who I'm going to call. Right. So having dispatch be the place where students can actually first turn to figure out what's needed is very, very helpful for us. Everybody knows the number. It's ingrained in where we go first. And so I'm really grateful for you for taking that on.
Absolutely. Another thing I want to highlight is that our security officers who are on campus and are highly visible, they're going to be much more involved in our fit for purpose response. Right. For instance, we receive a lot of calls about noise complaints or someone who may be smoking in their dorm room. Well, that doesn't necessitate a police officer response. You don't need 2 police officers responding, which is what we used to do. Right. How are students feeling about security responding to these calls versus the police? Well,
they definitely appreciate having security as opposed to one of the police members going. Although I think if security is not available, we will have to send a police officer. So I don't want people to think that we will never send a police officer. I think that's accurate. But I want to just say that I would like to put a marker out that we'd like to train students to go and ask people to turn the noise down themselves without having to call security first. That would be one way of doing it. But if you have to call someone, I do know that they appreciate having the security show up.
Yeah, we're finding too that students don't like to engage other students.
I know, but eventually we're gonna have to learn how to do that, because I think that that would be helpful for building the community.
One of the other things I would like to highlight is how we respond to students who may be in crisis. Ultimately, what we'd like to see is a co-response model where the police are responding with mental health professionals, but we're still working on that. We're not there yet. But what we have done is we've taken police officers. We're working to take police officers out of the traditional uniform, because we have found that a police uniform can be a trigger for some students, and we want to de-escalate. And we can de-escalate by our mere presence. So taking them out of the traditional uniform and having a softer uniform, keeping in mind all of our officers are trained in crisis intervention. We have found that this approach is working, and that students are much more happy that we're not responding looking like true traditional police officers, and that we're looking like it's a care-based response versus a traditional police response.
And I recall in our review of some of the, when we were doing the pilot, when we actually tested this care response approach to students who were having mental health crises, the crisis that they were saying, that was really, really helpful. So I'm glad that we're going to continue to really embed that into the work that you're doing and that what we're doing as well.
Good. Yeah, so we've been piloting this for about 1.5 years now, and we went from a traditional uniform to I just assigned officers to respond in plain clothes. We found that although plain clothes may be something that's desirable, as police officers, we need to be mindful about being able to identify ourselves as well.
Yes.
So we've gotten away from just the plain clothes, like someone coming in dressed like myself.
Do you have a uniform, a plain clothes uniform now, or what is it?
It's a softer look uniform,
Okay.
With a pullover. It's being designed right now. I think people are going to like it. Again, it's more. It looks like more of a collegial look, but it's still.
I saw the new ones for security, which actually looks very good for the summer.
Yeah, yeah. So this is we're not planting a flag to say we've succeeded by no means. We're still working and we're still evolving.
Well, you've been around since 1894. I assume that you're going to evolve. I think, and I do think that, and you've been here for now what, in 20 years?
Almost 20. Next year I begin my 25th year.
So I do see evolution in the police department in terms of the way it has worked. And now it's just, we're going to do turbocharged evolution in some ways because we need to. But I've always been grateful that you've been willing to take the next step.
Thank you.
It's really helpful for us.
It's not easy.
No, it's never easy.
It's not easy. It's not easy. I want to ask you about COVID and how COVID has affected your work as vice president and secretary of the university.
Well, it has been both difficult but also surprisingly wonderful in some ways. It's been difficult because most of our work is done with students on campus face to face, and of course I'm also responsible for some of the major traditions like commencement and opening assembly, which are really geared toward working with you, getting the community together in a celebration. So not having that has been hard in terms of creating a community and having it sit together. On the other hand, being on Zoom sometimes actually is helpful. I see more students.
Wow.
Can run meetings more efficiently. And actually, one of the things I love to keep is that we can see more students, more alumni, more faculty and staff because they can come in and out of meetings or larger events in ways that they couldn't if it was just a drop-in. So there's some things that have been great about it. There's some things that have been difficult. The one thing that has been consistent is the police have always been here. So, that never changed, which I'm grateful for. I know the president's grateful for. And so I think that didn't change, but just in terms of the emptiness of the campus, physical emptiness during that time was a little bit difficult. But again, there's always, you can make lemonade out of anything. So yeah, that's what we did.
I agree with you that Zoom has created opportunities for us to engage more. So that's something that we're probably going to continue to do, even as we continue to work our way through this pandemic. We were able to meet with so many community groups and students over the pandemic, probably more so than we would ever be able to do while on campus. And other people are able to come in and out of those meetings more easily as well.
Now, can I ask you a question? Because I got the sense that not only in the area of fit for purpose, but there was creativity coming out of this office as well. So I remember you did a video, I think it was, for this year's first year class because you couldn't meet as many, which I thought was interesting. And I'm wondering, did this podcast come out of the creativity of needing to get to people in a different way as opposed to just doing face-to-face meetings?
Yeah. So the answer is absolutely yes. Okay. One of the things that we were trying to do is continue our work following the release of the 21 CP report in how do we engage in our community during a pandemic. So, one of the things that we would always talk about is, part of community policing is meeting the community where they are.
Right.
Well, if everyone is home and everyone's on Zoom, well, we have to meet them there. Well, we also found that a lot of students and a lot of community members listen to podcasts. So if that's where people are, if that's where people are, then that's where we want to go. And we want to listen to every voice. We want to also share about ourselves, and to be honest, we want to just kind of let people know what's on our mind, and what we're thinking, because the co-production of public safety requires all of us to provide information to one another so that we can build systems for better outcomes, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do. So speaking of podcasts, I read that you like podcasts.
I do. I love podcasts.
So can you tell me one good thing that or what makes a good podcast? I'm still learning. I'm still new at this.
Well, one, you have a very good voice for podcasts, so I will say that because sometimes it's you want a powerful voice and you want someone who has a passion. I think that some of the ones that I listen to are the people who are very passionate about what they're talking about, curious and willing to learn. They might have a set of expertise, but they're really talking to people about how they're experiencing a particular topic. Lori Santos, by the way. Professor Santos, who is the head of college at Silliman, has a really wonderful podcast, The Happiness Lab, based on her research. And I think but she's had these interesting guests come on talking about it. So I think that's always really interesting, just to learn from someone who is an expert, but is also having a really interesting conversation with somebody about a different slant on the work. So I think that's really important. Is one of the things that I think that you're naturally going to do, because this is such an interesting topic, and I know you've been really focused on trying to figure out how to think about the community connection with the police.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. Professor Santos is a rock star.
She is
on campus,
but she evolved. She didn't start off as a rock star. She evolved, and so from her expertise. So I think that's probably in the cards for you as well.
Great. Kim, I want to thank you for your time today, your work, your partnership, and your role on campus, not just in partnering with public safety, but with all you do. And we didn't even touch on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, because we can have a podcast, we can have an episode on that alone. and there is a nexus between the work that we're doing in DEIB. So maybe we can get together again and talk about that.
Yes, we should. Podcast. We should. There's a lot coming out of the DIB planning process.
Yes.
So we'll have a lot to say about that in the coming weeks. We can have another conversation, certainly.
All right. So to our producers, we have her on the record. We have Kim on the record as coming back to talk about DEIB, okay? Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and for Campus Roll Call. And our wonderful guest, Secretary and Vice President Kim Goff-Crews. Remember to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and YouTube.
I'm going to do mine now. I'm going to subscribe now, actually. So I'll be listening to you in the car.
Roger that.
Okay.
Go Bulldogs.